Hello, I'm a man in my late 30s, a normal husband and father of 2 children. My wife and I are both working. I am in sales, so I have a flexible schedule. My mother-in-law is taking care of our little ones. She gave birth to my wife in her early 20s, so she became a grandmother at a relatively young age. We are reaping the benefits of that. I'm really grateful for it. But recently, I've had a secret affair with my mother-in-law. I'll confess that secret here on this channel. I am 10 years older than my wife. We met by chance, and a few months into our relationship, my wife became pregnant with our first child. It was a joyous event in our home, but I felt terrible about having to meet my mother-in-law. However, my mother-in-law, who was living alone, was delighted to have a precious grandchild and approved our marriage. My wife was attending nursing college when we met and took a leave of absence after learning about her pregnancy. We quickly got married, had our baby, and she returned to school. My mother-in-law, who lived nearby, came to our house every day to take care of the baby. And I also helped my young wife so she could focus on her exams and internships. My wife said she enjoyed working as a nurse. She got a job at a university hospital. Because our child was young, she applied to be a ward nurse and did not work 3 shifts. She worked a regular schedule, going to work in the morning and coming home in the evening. I communicated a lot with my mother-in-law, who was taking care of our child, and started going out with her and our child on Saturdays, because my wife also worked at the hospital on that day. My mother-in-law lost her husband in a traffic accident when my wife, her older daughter, was 10 years old. Without time to grieve, my mother-in-law, left alone with 2 young daughters, did all kinds of jobs. She worked at a clothing factory at the time and bought clothes cheaply to sell, which turned out to be a big success. My mother-in-law has a knack for business and has been successful in every business she has started since then. So she bought land and built a building to rent out. By using that land as collateral, she is currently running an online shopping mall. Although a lot of money goes into advertising, the operation is successful and she earns a lot. She also has many employees. How reassuring it is to have my mother-in-law taking good care of our children, even when she's busy. Plus, she cooks all the meals. She says we can't skip meals because my wife is busy. My wife, who seemed to be suited for nursing, left the university hospital because it was very hard to work with her senior nurse. Then she started working at a pediatric clinic near our house. The pediatrician was well known in the area and had many patients, but my wife ended up having an affair with that doctor. I saw it with my own eyes. My wife would come home for lunch after going to work at the hospital, or sometimes she would eat out. But one day, I had some business at a client's place near our home, so I stopped by the house and found that my wife was not there. I assumed she was having lunch near the hospital, so I called her. She didn't answer the phone. Wanting to see my young and pretty wife even once more, I decided to surprise her at the hospital. It was 15 minutes before the end of lunchtime, a time when I heard patients usually don't come in. When I arrived at the hospital, it was empty. I heard laughter coming from the exam room, and the door was slightly open. I wondered what amusing conversation they were having, so I slightly opened the door of the exam room to enter. I intended to say hello and go, but my wife and the doctor were making love on the patient bed, fearlessly, in broad daylight. I filmed them with my shaking hands. Still, they didn't know I was there. I left without saying a word. Then I started wondering what to do about this situation. I've heard that many men and women who work together have affairs, but I never imagined my wife would be one of them. For several days, I watched my wife's behavior while agonizing over the situation. My wife started wearing heavier makeup than usual. She even started wearing dark lipstick, and she changed her perfume. She bought flashy earrings. She bought a new bag, new clothes, and started to dress up. I hadn't thought I was indifferent to my wife, but she had changed a lot. Recently, she got a perm. Thinking that all this was done to impress a man, I felt like my blood was boiling. Living with my young wife, I tried to avoid sounding like an old grump. I thought and acted from my wife's perspective, yielding a lot to her. It felt like I was utterly pathetic. My wife prepared for work as if nothing was wrong. We used to call each other every lunchtime, but I realized the calls had become infrequent. I was torn between telling my wife the truth or just letting it go. My mother-in-law, who is quick, seemed to notice that I had a problem. A few days later, when my wife said she had a company dinner, my mother-in-law came to our house. My wife confidently said, "Bro, I'll be back very late today. The doctor said he's treating us to all 3 rounds. Don't wait up for me," and left. After work, I had dinner with the kids, bathed them, and put them to bed earlier than usual. I don't even remember what mindset I was in when I read them a bedtime story. My mother-in-law brought out a beer from the fridge and suggested we have a drink. She said it looked like I had some concerns these days, so I confessed everything to her, trusting her. My mother-in-law began to rage, calling Sophia, that woman, a terrible woman. She seemed more furious than me. I had to calm her down. She cried bitterly, saying she won't let it slide that her daughter, who she had raised without a father, was having an affair in the neighborhood, despite having a considerate husband now that she had finally settled down. I told her I would handle it, that it might just be a passing wind, and we should wait for her to come back. My mother-in-law apologized profusely to me. That day, I remember drinking more than I ever had in my life, and something unthinkable happened. My mother-in-law and I, both drunk, ended up complimenting each other's looks, not sure if we were being serious or joking, and she expressed a desire to meet a man who could keep her company, saying that she now had money, but would be perfect if she could fill just one more void. She wanted to remarry. Seeing her trust me and speak honestly made me feel sorry for her, and I started to desire to bring joy to my youthful mother-in-law. We made sure the front door was locked tight and made love in a small room. My mother-in-law was shy, saying it was the first time she had felt joy. As a woman in almost 20 years, her shyness made her even more attractive, and we made love once more. My wife came home in the early hours of the next day, and I decided to pretend I didn't know about her affair. I deleted the video I had taken before. I'm sure my wife will eventually sort out her relationship with the doctor and come back to me. After all, I now have a new girlfriend in the form of my mother-in-law. We met frequently, making excuses to come home during lunchtime to make love. One day, my mother-in-law said, "Your father-in-law always had too little time, which left me unsatisfied. But you're a really great man." How could I not love my wise mother-in-law who knew how to boost a man's ego? These days, my wife is still glued to the doctor at the hospital. I no longer desire my wife. I prefer my mature mother-in-law. Considering our children, I think it's right to maintain this family, so I don't intend to divorce. I like this win-win situation where I turn a blind eye to my wife's affair and have a relationship with my mother-in-law. I know that I, who have such a relationship, may not be forgiven as a human being. Recently, I ranked first in the sales department and received a bonus from the boss. So I went to the department store with my children and mother-in-law, excluding my wife. I bought my mother-in-law's favorite navy coat and clothes for our kids. I felt a refreshing feeling. After all, my mother-in-law is such a beautiful person to me. I'm still not sure who opened their heart first between my mother-in-law and me. Meeting my mother-in-law, who doesn't have to worry about getting pregnant, often is a joy. Seeing her happy in my arms gives me satisfaction, and I think I'm a pretty cool guy. These days, I find myself humming without realizing it.